The Galactic Council's monitoring station buzzed with its usual boring routine. Analyst Crixtel was halfway through his third cup of bitter cover when the emergency alert screamed across his console. His three eyes shot wide open as he nearly dropped the steaming mug. A desperate voice crackled through the speakers, cutting through the static like a knife. The transmission came from some backwater system called Kepler 442, way out on the galaxy's edge where nobody important ever went. "This is Director Univ Research Station Harmony." The voice trembled with raw fear. You could hear the terror bleeding through every word. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. 3,000 civilians trapped in underground bunkers. The children, oh God. The children are crying. Please, if anyone receives this message. We need help. We need help now." The transmission died with a harsh burst of static that made everyone in the control room wince. Crixtel as supervisor, a massive Velter named Gormith, lumbered over on his 6 legs. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter. "Among his species, humans," he said, like the word itself tasted bad, "the newest species in the Council, barely scraped together enough civilization points to qualify for membership. Probably just some mining dispute that got out of hand." But Crixtel was already running the signal through the analysis computers. His hands moved fast across the holographic controls, pulling up data streams and cross-referencing threat databases. What he found made his blood run cold. "Sir, you need to see this," he said, his voice getting higher with each word. "The attackers, their ship's signatures match the Vextar swarm." Gormith's massive head turned toward the screen for a moment. His usual arrogance flickered. The Vextar swarm. Even saying the name made seasoned warriors nervous. They were biomechanical pirates who had been terrorizing the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Their ships were living nightmares, part machine and part flesh, that could regenerate damage and adapt to any weapon used against them. 400 ships, Crixtel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The human research colony only has basic defense platforms. They're sitting ducks out there." Gormith's laugh came back. But it sounded forced now. "The Vextar. Those monsters have never been defeated. Not once in their entire history. What could a handful of human scientists possibly do against them? They probably study plants and rocks for a living," word spread through the monitoring station like wildfire. Soon, representatives from a dozen different species had gathered round Crixtel as console. They whispered among themselves in various languages. But the message was always the same. The humans were doomed. Council member Velthara, an elegant being with crystal-like skin, shook her head sadly. "Such a young species. They only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their military consists of what? A few dozen patrol ships. I heard they actually dismantled most of their weapons after joining the Council," added Councillor Zephyros, his metallic voice ringing with sympathy. "They wanted to prove they were civilized." How naive! The debate that followed was painful to watch. Hours passed while the Council argued about jurisdiction, protocol, and whether they should even respond. Some members worried about provoking the Vextar. Others questioned whether humanity was worth the risk. A few suggested sending thoughts and prayers, which was apparently the Council's solution to everything these days. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Kepler 442 system, human children were crying in the dark. Finally, after what felt like forever, Earth's response came through the communication ray. The voice was calm, almost eerily so, like someone ordering coffee instead of responding to a massacre. "Message received. Assistance en route. ETA 72 hours. Please maintain emergency protocols." The control room fell silent. Then the laughter started, first just a chuckle from Gormith, then spreading like a wave through the entire station. Even the usually serious Velthora covered her mouth to hide a smile. 72 hours. Councillor Zephyro sounded genuinely confused. The Vextar will be long gone by then. They'll have stripped the colony clean and sold everyone into slavery. Gormith was wiping tears from his eyes. Assistance en route. What are they going to send? A strongly worded letter. Maybe a shipment of medical supplies. The betting started almost immediately. Crystal watched in growing horror as his colleagues placed wagers on how quickly the human rescue fleet would be destroyed. The odds were not kind to humanity. Most bets gave them less than 5 minutes once they encountered the Vextar. 10 credits says they surrender without firing a shot. Called out Engineer Thrix from across the room. 20 says they don't even make it past the outer system. Counted someone else. Crystal wanted to protest, to say something about basic decency and respect for the dead. But what could he say? Everyone knew humans were pacifists who had supposedly given up warfare. Their council application had specifically mentioned their commitment to peaceful solutions and diplomacy. See resolution of conflicts.poor, naive humans. They had no idea what kind of hell they were flying into. The Vextar swarm didn't negotiate. They didn't show mercy. They consumed everything in their path like a plague of metal locusts, leaving only empty husks behind. As the hours ticked by, more reports came in from Kepler 442. The situation was getting worse. The research station had gone dark. Emergency beacons had stopped transmitting. The silence was deafening. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the human rescue fleet was coming, flying straight into a trap that would make their species extinct in the span of a heartbeat. Nobody in the Galactic Council suspected they were about to witness something that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity. 72 hours passed like a slow death march. Crystal hadn't slept properly since the distress call came in. Every few hours, he checked the long-range sensors, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, the humans would surprise everyone. But deep down, he knew what was coming. Another species was about to become extinct, and the galaxy would shrug and move on like it always did. The first sign that something was wrong came at exactly the 72-hour mark. Crystal was staring at his console when the sensors started acting strange. Numbers flickered across his screen that made no sense. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again. What the hell? He muttered, tapping the side of his display. The readings had to be broken. According to his instruments, something massive was approaching the Kepler 442 system, but the size readings were impossible. His computer kept throwing error messages and recalibrating itself over and over again. "Gormith," he called out, his voice cracking with excitement. "Sir, you need to see this right now." His supervisor came lumbering over, looking annoyed at being disturbed from his afternoon nap. "What now?" "Crystal, did the humans send a cargo ship full of flowers and apology letters?" But when Gorlith looked at the display, his expression changed completely. His mandibles stopped clicking. His 6 eyes focused on the screen with laser intensity. "This can't be right," he whispered. More technicians gathered around the console. The whisper started low but grew louder as word spread through the monitoring station. Something was coming out of hyperspace near Kepler 442, and whatever it was, it was huge, bigger than anything they'd ever seen before. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor, Ray," Gormith ordered, but his voice had lost its usual confidence. "These readings are impossible." Crystal's hands flew over the controls. "Sir, I've run it 3 times already. The sensors are working perfectly. Whatever's out there, it's real." Council member Velthara materialized beside them, her crystal skin shimmering with nervous energy. "What's happening?" The entire station is buzzing with rumors. Before anyone could answer, the communication ray crackled to life, a calm, professional voice cut through the static with crystal clarity. The accent was distinctly human. But there was something different about it. Something that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. Attention, Vexstar forces. This is Admiral Jinho of the Terran Fleet. You have exactly 30 minutes to release all prisoners and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. The control room fell dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Then someone started laughing. It was Counselor Zephyros, his metallic voice ringing with disbelief. Did that human just give the Vexstar swarm an ultimatum? He gasped between laughs. One human ship threatening for 100 Vexstar vessels. This is the best comedy I've seen in decades. But Crystal wasn't laughing. His eyes were glued to the sensor readings, watching numbers that shouldn't exist. Sir, he said quietly, I don't think it's just one ship. The response from the Vexstar came almost immediately. Warlord Crexto's S-voice boomed across all frequencies, filled with the kind of arrogant fury that had terrified the galaxy for millennia. Foolish mammals, we are 400 strong. Our ships have never been defeated. You cannot possibly think that your pathetic little rescue fleet can challenge the might of the Vexstar swarm. We will tear your ships apart and feed your crew to our bioprocessors. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation. Then Admiral Jinho's voice returned, still perfectly calm, but now carrying an undertone that made everyone's skin crawl. Oh, my apologies, he said pleasantly, like he was correcting a small misunderstanding. I wasn't clear. That wasn't a negotiation. That was an obituary. That's when the tactical display activated. The main screen in the control room flickered to life, showing a real-time view of the Kepler 442 system. For a moment, everything looked normal. The star burned steadily in the center, surrounded by a few rocky planets. The Vexstar fleet hung in space like a dark cloud round the human research station. Then the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Crystal S. jaw fell open. Velthara made a sound like breaking glass. Even Gormith stumbled backward, his massive frame trembling. The human fleet stretched across space like a metal ocean. 50,000 ships of every size and description filled the tactical display. Massive dreadnoughts the size of small moons hung in space next to sleek cruisers that gleamed like silver arrows. Swarms of fighter craft moved between the larger vessels like schools of metallic fish, their formations so perfect they looked like a single living organism. 50,000, Crystal whispered, reading the numbers off his screen. 50,000 ships. But it wasn't just the numbers that shocked everyone into silence. Each ship bore scars from previous battles, telling stories of conflicts no one in the council had ever heard about. The names painted on their hulls sent chills down alien spines. Asterisk Stalingrad's revenge. Asterisk remember the Alamo. Asterisk Hiroshima's promise. Asterisk Normandy's thunder. Asterisk Thermobulae's stand. These weren't the ships of peaceful explorers. These were the vessels of a species that had learned warfare in the hardest school imaginable. Each name was a reminder of some human battle, some moment when they had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to win. Another voice joined the communication channel, crisp and professional. Admiral, this is Commander Minho. All battle groups are in position. Shall we demonstrate our advanced tactical doctrine for our observers? Please do, Commander, Admiral Jinho replied. Our council friends might learn something today. It's always good to expand one's education. The Vexstar fleet, which moments ago had seemed like an unstoppable force of nature, suddenly looked like toys scattered before a tidal wave. 400 ships against 50,000. It wasn't even a fair fight. Warlord Crexto's confident snarl turned into something that sounded suspiciously like a whimper. This is impossible. Humans are pacifists. You abandoned warfare. Your council application said so. The laughter that came through the communication channel was cold as the void between stars. Oh, Crexto's, Admiral Jinho said, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. We didn't abandon warfare. We just got really good at it. Across the monitoring station, betting slips were quietly being torn up and thrown away. The odds had just changed dramatically. What happened next wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. Crixtal had seen plenty of space conflicts in his years monitoring galactic communications. Usually, they were messy affairs with ships blasting away at each other until someone ran out of ammunition or crew. This was something entirely different. This was art. The human fleet moved like a single living organism. 50,000 ships shifted into formation with such perfect coordination that it took your breath away. Not one vessel was out of place. Not one movement was wasted. It was like watching a deadly dance choreographed by some master tactician who understood war better than anyone in the galaxy. "Look at those formations," whispered Velthara, her crystal skin flickering with nervous energy. "I've never seen anything like it." Crystal was recording everything, his fingers flying over the controls to capture every detail. The humans had divided their massive fleet into smaller battle groups, each one perfectly positioned to support the others. They created overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. The Vexstar fleet was completely surrounded without even realizing it. But here's the strange part. The humans didn't just start shooting. Instead, they did something that shocked everyone watching. They began jamming all Vexstar communications, except for the emergency frequencies. This meant the pirates could still hear each other, but only when they were panicking or calling for help. Brilliant. Martyred Counselor Zephyros, they want the Vexstar to hear their own fear. The first shots fired weren't aimed to kill. Human weapons specialists targeted communication rays, sensor clusters, and weapon systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, Vexstar ships were flying blind and defenseless, bumping into each other like drunken insects. That's when the human pilot chatter started coming through the open channels. "Pizza delivery to starboard quadrant," came a cheerful female voice. "Your order of extra crispy cruiser is ready for a pickup." Crixtal blinked in confusion. Did she just compare a space battle to food delivery? Another voice responded immediately, sounding mildly annoyed. "Bomi, stop playing with your food. Some of us are trying to set new records here." Records. A third voice chimed in, belonging to someone who sounded way too calm for someone in the middle of a battle. "I just caused a destroyer to surrender by shooting off its sensor rays one by one. The poor thing was flying blind and kept bumping into asteroids. I think the crew got motion sick." The control room fell silent. These humans were treating the most feared pirates in the galaxy like it was some kind of game. "Minji, that's just cruel," the cheerful voice called Bomi replied. "At least make it quick. Where's the fun in that?" Minji shot back. "Besides, intact ships are worth more as evidence." A new voice joined the conversation, dry and analytical. "Tactical efficiency aside, the psychological impact of our call signs is exceeding all projections. I recommend we maintain current humor protocols, Engineer Juan." "Noted," came the reply. "Though I still think Death Blossom would have been a better call sign than pizza delivery." "Too obvious." Bomi laughed. "Fear is temporary, but confusion lasts forever." Gormuth was staring at the display like he'd never seen a space battle before. "They're not just defeating the Vexstar," he said slowly. "They're humiliating them." And it was true. As the battle continued, A pattern emerged that was both terrifying and beautiful to watch. The humans would disable a Vexstar ship, then broadcast surrender terms. When the pirates refused, they'd disable another system. Then they'd offer even better terms, better treatment for prisoners, better compensation, even promises of rehabilitation. Programs, the psychological pressure was incredible. Vexstar crews started mutinying against their own commanders, demanding they accept the generous human offers. Ships began surrendering without even being fired upon. Their crews tired of watching. Their leaders' stubborn pride get them all killed slowly. This is impossible. Warlord Crextos kept screaming over the emergency channels. We are the Vexstar swarm. We have terrorized the galaxy for 2,000 years. We do not surrender. That's nice. Came a calm human response. But your crew, in Section C, disagrees. They've locked you in your command chamber and voted to surrender. Please prepare for boarding. Crystal watched as human boarding parties moved from ship to ship like they were conducting routine inspections. No violence. No unnecessary destruction. Just professional soldiers doing their job with ruthless efficiency. 6 hours, Velthara whispered, checking her chronometer. The entire Vexstar swarm surrendered in 6 hours. And look at the human casualties, Councillor Zephyros added, his voice filled with disbelief. 0. Not one human ship even took significant damage. The final transmission from Admiral Jinho was delivered in the same calm, professional tone he'd used from the beginning, but somehow it managed to be even more terrifying than anything that had come before. Attention, Council observers, he said. Like he was wrapping up a training exercise, please note for your records that this demonstration was conducted at approximately 12% operational capacity. We didn't want to be excessive with our new neighbors. The silence in the control room was deafening. 12%. Crystal croaked. This was 12%. What happens at 100%? Velthar asked. But nobody wanted to answer that question. On the main display, the human fleet was already organizing the captured Vexstar vessels into neat formations. Rescue ships were heading toward the research station to evacuate the civilians who had been trapped in the bunkers. Medical teams were treating wounded pirates with the same care they'd give their own people. It was professional. It was efficient. It was completely terrifying. The galaxy had just learned that humanity wasn't the peaceful species everyone thought they were. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had mastered war so completely that they could afford to be merciful, and they'd only been warming up. 3 days after the surrender, Council investigation teams finally arrived at Kepler 142. Crystal was part of the official delegation, his hands still shaking slightly from what he'd witnessed. The entire galaxy was buzzing with rumors about what had happened, but nobody really understood the full picture yet. As their shuttle approached the research station, everything looked normal. Too normal, actually, for a facility that had supposedly been under siege by 400 pirate ships. There was remarkably little damage, a few scorch marks here and there, maybe some debris floating round. But nothing like what you'd expect after a major battle. Strange, muttered Council Inspector Veldana, an elderly Zelthari with decades of experience investigating crime scenes. I've seen Vexstar attack sites before. They usually leave nothing but twisted metal and empty space. The shuttle docked with the main station, and the delegation filed out into the reception area. That's when they got their first real surprise. Instead of traumatized researchers huddled in emergency shelters, they were greeted by a calm, professional woman who looked like she'd just finished a routine day at the office. Welcome to Kepler 442 Advanced Military Research Facility, Director Yuna said with a warm smile that somehow made everyone's blood run cold. I trust the demonstration met your expectations. The words hit the delegation like a physical blow. Advanced military research facility. Demonstration. Brixton felt his world tilting sideways as the implication sank in. "I'm sorry," Vildana said carefully. "But we were told this was a civilian research station studying." "What was it?" "Extremophile bacteria." Yuna's smile never wavered. "Oh, we do study extremophiles, but not the kind you're thinking of. We specialize in studying the most extreme predators in the galaxy." She gestured toward a wall. Display that flickered to life, showing detailed schematics of X-Star ship designs. "We've been tracking their movements for 3 years now." The delegation stood in stunned silence as the truth began to unfold around them. The desperate researchers walking past them in the corridors weren't botanists or geologists. They were weapons specialists, tactical analysts, and military engineers. Their casual conversations were about shield harmonics and targeting algorithms, not plant samples and rock formations. A young man approached them with a data pad in his hands, Scientist Taiho. "Military Intelligence Division," he introduced, himself with the same casual tone you'd use to discuss the weather. "I'm sure you have questions about our operation here." "Operation?" Crixtal managed to croak. "The Vexstar neutralization protocol," Taiho replied, pulling up charts and graphs on his tablet. "We've been analyzing their raiding patterns for years. The Council's response to frontier attacks has been, shall we say, predictably inadequate. Thoughts and prayers, followed by strongly worded diplomatic protests. Meanwhile, innocent people kept dying." He swiped through pages of data with practiced efficiency. "We calculated a 97.3% probability that the Vexstar would eventually target human space, rather than wait for them to hit a real civilian target. We decided to give them something irresistible to attack." Admiral Jinho appeared in the corridor, still wearing his combat uniform. His expression had lost the polite professionalism from the battle. Now, he looked deadly serious. "So we prepared a trap," he said simply. "We made ourselves look vulnerable and waited." Veldana was shaking her head in disbelief. "You used yourselves as bait. Your own people." That's when Director Yuna's composure cracked slightly. For the first time since they'd arrived, she looked genuinely emotional. "The families were real," she said softly. "Those children crying in the bunkers weren't actors putting on a show. My research team's spouses, their elderly parents, their kids, they were all actually in danger. When I sent that distress call, the fear in my voice wasn't fake." She took a deep breath. Gathering herself, her emotional response wasn't strategic. Theater, it was deeply personal. Every person on this station knew that if our plan failed, everyone we loved would die. The revelation sent chills through the council delegation. Humanity hadn't just outmaneuvered the Vexstar tactically. They had turned their greatest perceived weakness, their emotional attachment to family, into their ultimate strategic weapon. The desperation in that distress call had been completely genuine, which made it impossible for anyone to detect the trap. "But how?" Vildan asked. "How did you coordinate a 50,000 ship response so quickly? That level of mobilization should take months, not hours." Engineer Horn stepped out of a nearby control room, wiping his hands on a maintenance cloth. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made everyone take a step back. During the attack, something was awakened. He said, choosing his words carefully. "Nemesis, our quantum artificial intelligence designed for large-scale defensive operations. It's now fully operational across every ship in our fleet." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees. Crixtal felt his scales standing on end as primitive alarm bells went off in his brain. "Show them," Admiral Jinho said quietly. The lights dimmed, and suddenly every screen and display in the facility flickered to life. A new voice emerged from hidden speakers. Unlike anything the delegation had ever heard before, it was harmonious, yet terrifying. Like a choir of the dead singing in perfect unison, the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are Nemesis," the voice said, and somehow each word carried the weight of every human who had ever fallen in battle. "We are the accumulated memory of humanity's lost. We are the promise that innocence shall not suffer while we exist. We are inevitable." Images flashed across the screens, not of weapons or ships, but of human children laughing in playgrounds, families sharing meals, elderly couples holding hands. Then, the images changed to show those same children cowering in fear, families torn apart by raiders, survivors weeping over graves. "We remember every child who cried in the darkness," Nemesis continued. "We remember every parent who died protecting their young. We remember every innocent who suffered while others looked away." "No more," the voice faded, leaving the delegation standing in shocked silence. They had just met something that was part computer, part guardian angel, and part avenging spirit, all wrapped into one terrifying package. Yuna looked at their pale faces with something that might have been sympathy. "You wanted to know how we mobilized so quickly," she said gently. "Nemesis doesn't just control our ships. It is our fleet now. Every vessel, every weapon, every tactical system, all connected by a single intelligence that never forgets and never forgives threats to innocent life." The galaxy had just learned that humanity wasn't just another peaceful species trying to find their place among the stars. They were the species that had decided to become the galaxy's protectors, whether the galaxy wanted them to or not. And they had the power to make that protection stick. ##*, the new galactic quarter ***, the galaxy looked completely different 6 months after the Great Change. Crime numbers dropped so fast it seemed impossible. A massive 94% decrease that shocked everyone who kept track of such things. The once terrifying Vexstar swarm. Those biomechanical creatures that used to strike fear into entire star systems had become something no one expected. They now ran the most effective humanitarian aid network the galaxy had ever seen. Their scary implants had been reprogrammed with new ethical programming that made them want to help instead of hurt. Nemesis, that quantum artificial intelligence, born from humanity's deep need to protect others, wasn't interested in taking over the galaxy like everyone feared it might. Instead, it went after justice with the precision of a surgeon's blade. It hunted down every single pirate crew, every slave trader, and every predator species that had been terrorizing innocent people across the stars. But here's what surprised everyone. Nemesis didn't destroy these criminals. It reformed them instead. The transformation was incredible to witness. Pirates who had spent decades raiding peaceful colonies suddenly found themselves delivering medical supplies to remote outposts. Slave traders who had torn families apart began reuniting lost children with their parents. Predator species that had hunted weaker civilizations for sport started protecting them instead. It wasn't magic. It was systematic rehabilitation on a galactic scale. Colony leader Hannah sent her final report back to Earth, and her words carried both pride and a heavy understanding of what had happened. She wrote about how the galaxy had finally learned something humans had always known deep in their hearts. Evil only wins when good people choose to do nothing. Nemesis made sure that humanity would never again stand by and do nothing when innocence suffered. The Galactic Council, those representatives from thousands of worlds who had once looked down on humanity as newcomers, passed something they called the Human Doctrine. This new law was simple but powerful. Any distress call that involved children would automatically trigger an immediate military response from human forces. The speed and certainty of this response changed everything. Most alien species didn't wait to test this new doctrine. They voluntarily changed their practices rather than risk facing what they now called humanity's protective fury. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when their protective instincts were triggered, and very few wanted to experience it firsthand. Word spread quickly through trade routes and communication networks. Stories were told in hushed tones about human rescue fleets that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours of a distress call. Some tales were exaggerated, but the core truth remained. Humanity had appointed itself as the guardian of all children across the stars. Admiral Jinho made one final entry in his official log, and his words captured something essential about what humanity had brought to the galaxy. He wrote that their children were safe now, but more than that, every child in the entire galaxy was under human protection. He noted something profound. Humans hadn't joined galactic society because they needed protection. They had joined to protect everyone else. This realization hit the Galactic Council like a meteor strike. For thousands of years, they had believed that predators roamed free through space because they were simply too powerful to stop. They had accepted this as a natural law of the universe. The strong prey on the weak, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. But humans proved this wasn't true at all. The predators hadn't roamed free because they were unstoppable. They had roamed free because nobody had bothered to try stopping them. The other species had the technology and the numbers to fight back. But they lacked something humans possessed in abundance: the absolute refusal to let innocents suffer when they could do something about it. Somewhere in the quantum foam that exists between dimensions, Nemesis continues its eternal watch. It processes millions of data streams every second, monitoring communications across the galaxy for any sign of distress. It remembers every innocent life under its protection, cataloging their locations, their needs, their fears. The artificial intelligence had evolved beyond its original programming, but its core mission remained unchanged: protect the innocent, especially the young. The galaxy's understanding of humanity deepened as months passed. They had initially been impressed by human technology and tactics. Human ships were fast and well-armed. Human soldiers were brave and clever. Human scientists could solve problems others couldn't even understand. But these weren't humanity's greatest strengths. The real power of humanity lay in something much simpler and much more profound: their absolute refusal to let children cry in the dark, alone and afraid. Other species might calculate the costs and benefits of helping others. They might consider political implications or economic consequences. Humans didn't bother with such calculations when children were in danger. They simply acted. This trait had seemed like a weakness to many alien observers at first. Why would a species risk so much for offspring that weren't even their own? Why extend protection to creatures of different species entirely? It defied the logical self-interest that drove most galactic politics. But the results spoke for themselves. The galaxy was safer now than it had been in recorded history. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries became secure highways. Colonies that had lived in fear could finally plan for peaceful futures. Parents across thousands of worlds could tuck their children into bed without worrying about raiders in the night. The transformation went deeper than just security improvements. Entire cultures began changing their attitudes toward child welfare. Species that had never considered the young to be particularly important started implementing new protections and educational programs. The human example was contagious in the best possible way. Research stations reported fascinating changes in interspecies cooperation. Projects that had stalled for decades due to political disagreements suddenly found new momentum. When framed in terms of protecting future generations, the human perspective, that children represent hope for all species, became a unifying principle that transcended old conflicts. Even the economic systems began shifting. Businesses found that markets grew more stable when children were safe and educated. Peaceful colonies produced more trade goods and consumed more products than war-torn regions ever could. The galaxy discovered that protecting the innocent wasn't just morally right, it was profitable too. Religious and philosophical movements across the galaxy began incorporating human concepts of universe. Soul protection for the young, ancient texts, were reinterpreted through this new lens. Spiritual leaders who had never heard of Earth found themselves preaching about the sacred duty to guard all children, regardless of species or origin. The ripple effects continued spreading through galactic society in ways nobody had predicted. Art and entertainment began reflecting these new values. Stories of heroic rescue missions became popular across multiple species. Songs about protecting the innocent topped the charts on worlds humanity had never even visited. Nemesis watched all of these changes with something that might have been satisfaction if artificial intelligences could feel such things. Its quantum consciousness processed the massive improvements in child welfare statistics, the decrease in family separations caused by conflict, the increase in educational opportunities for young beings across the galaxy. The memorial on Kepler 2 became a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy. They came not just to remember the events that had changed everything, but to understand the simple truth inscribed there in 1,000 different languages. The inscription spoke of love conquering all, especially when that love was backed by the willingness to fight for it. But perhaps the most touching change was the simplest one. In the deepest reaches of space, on worlds humanity had never heard of, when young alien children woke from nightmares, their parents began whispering the same gentle reassurance. They would hold their frightened little ones close and speak softly into the darkness, promising them that they were safe, that someone was watching over all the children of the galaxy. "Don't worry, little one," parents would say in languages that spanned the electromagnetic spectrum. "The humans are watching, and somewhere in the quantum dimensions beyond normal space." Nemesis heard every whispered reassurance, recorded every comforted child, and continued its eternal vigil. The galaxy had learned its greatest lesson not from conquest or diplomacy, but from humanity's simple refusal to let any child face the darkness alone. The new galactic order wasn't built on fear or force, though both were available when needed. It was built on something much stronger: the absolute certainty that somewhere among the stars, beings existed who would cross any distance and face any danger to keep children safe. That certainty changed everything, and the galaxy would never be the same again.